Fate is an ugly, broke loser who works as a professional doormat for some of the kingdom's so-called holy knights, who bully him for kicks. This changes when he finds a demonic sword that makes him stronger every time he racks up a W. As he evolves into a Giga Chad, Fate begins his journey of sweet revenge and claps the baddie who simps only for him. But before this, he is just a useless gatekeeper who curses his luck for being born with a lame skill.
Oh shit!
The only thing his skill is good at is making him feel hungry all the time, and while he complains to the plot gods about this worthless gluttony skill, his bosses bother everyone as they pass through town, beating and bullying the poor commoners for any transgression, even as little as touching their feet.
Ugh, loser.
The oldest of them, Raphael, tells his siblings to let the commoners be and reminds them to be patient, as they have their personal punching bag waiting for them at the palace gate. They arrive at Fate's location and throw him his daily wage, which is even less than what a street beggar makes. The sadistic leader of the a-hole pack tells Fate to pick it up, but as soon as he kneels to do so, Hado, his lump of a brother, steps on his hand, crushing all his bones. He then kicks him in the stomach and calls him a filthy piece of scum, all while Raphael reminds him how someone as worthless as him would have been rotting somewhere had they not given him this job. As Fate realizes the world will always remain unfair to powerless people like him, the bitch of the group, Memel, steps forward and tells Fate he should be licking their boots and thanking them right now. Raphael tells Fate to stand back up, but Hado kicks him in the face as soon as he tries to, all while Raphael yaps about him being an undisciplined dog. This scene is suddenly interrupted by Roxy, another holy knight, but one with a heart of gold. She tells Raphael and company to quit treating Fate like shit when he's the one doing them a favor by guarding the palace, which is supposed to be their duty. Raphael says he's just trying to give this unemployed weakling a job, but Roxy tells him to worry more about fixing his Dora the Explorer haircut, rather than people's employment status.
Pow!
Losing the argument, this self-proclaimed diva flees the field with his two sidekicks, leaving Roxy behind to tend to Fate's injuries. She immediately helps him up and cleans his wounds, making him blush as this is the first time he's ever felt the touch of a woman. Roxy takes the flag from him as it's her turn to watch the gate now, and Fate bids her farewell. Later, he heads to a bar and fantasizes about Roxy while he eats, happy that someone is worried about him. The barkeeper asks whether he got beaten to a pulp once again, judging by his appearance, but Fate says it's just his face looking as shitty as usual. As he leaves, the barkeeper recalls how the last guy to gatekeep was tortured to death by Raphael and his siblings. On his way back home, Fate notices some thieves breaking into the palace and quickly rushes there to inform Roxy. She tells him to mind the gate while she heads inside to deal with the thieves. While he waits outside, listening to the sound of swords clashing, one of the criminals runs toward him, trying to escape. Fate realizes if he lets this loser get by him, Roxy would never clap him, so he uses the lance to harpoon the thief, unaliving him on the spot.
Whoa!
Suddenly, his skill, Gluttony, activates for the first time, and his stats skyrocket, leaving him with telepathy and identification skills. He doesn't understand what happened, but before he can find out, Roxy runs up to him and holds his hands, asking whether he's injured anywhere. As she stares at him, blushing, Fate hears her thoughts, finding out that she is relieved at seeing him unharmed. He eventually figures it's telepathy, which works when he touches the other person. Roxy says she needs to report the event and proposes that Fate start working for her family instead of Raphael's, so his resume no longer has punching bag for job experience. Fate wonders if she might actually have some feelings for him, but he shrugs it off as fantasy. As expected, he immediately accepts her offer. Later, as he returns to his mansion, he is still surprised by his stats and wonders if he can finally start fighting with his new skills. The next day, he heads out to shop for a sword and uses Identify to pick out a particularly unique one from a pile of trash. He compares himself to how filthy and beat up the thing looks, sympathizing with it. But then the sword starts talking to him.
What the hell?
It introduces itself as greed and tells him he'll make it worth it if he buys it. Meanwhile, Memel bitches to Raphael about how Roxy has stolen their kick toy, but he tells her he has better things to worry about than some filthy piece of trash. She wonders what that is, and he says he's researching immortality. On the other hand, Fate heads to a field full of goblins, and every time he slays one, Gluttony activates, and his stats increase. He doesn't get it, but after he slays about 100 goblins, Greed explains that Gluttony skill is basically a cheat code. which allows him to steal the stats and skills of whoever he unalives. The only downside is he'll never level up, even if he has the stats of a literal god. He further warns him not to let other people know, and fate decides he'll remain a solo act. Back in the city, he sells all the goblin ears he collected for a good chunk of change and decides to finally eat some actual meat. However, on his way there, some wannabe gangster bumps into him and tells him to go to hell. Fate notices the little girl he's dragging along and is surprised when he hears her pleas for help through his telepathy. He follows the thug to an abandoned warehouse, where the loser ties the little girl to a post and begins to terrorize her, telling her she'll be sold to the Holy Knights and become their plaything. Soon, he leaves while the girl cries, only for Fate to jump scare her with his pitiful face and promise that he'll help her escape. He unties her, but before they can escape, the thug returns and tells Fate his do-gooder shit will only get him into a medical coma. Greed suggests that Fate run for it, since the thug already thinks he's weak, and use that to create a better angle of attack. He takes the advice and drags the little girl along as he runs behind some crates to hide. The thug follows after, but Fate distracts him with some cargo boxes while he jumps at him from behind, slashing his sword right at him. The thug dodges and activates his own magic sword, warning Fate that he's about to die. Greed recognizes this skill and tells Fate to strike him now, and with this, he gets the upper hand and pins the loser down quickly, asking which of the knights paid him to kidnap the girl. The rat instantly gives up Hado's name, and at that very same time, that very same a-hole flexes his non-existent archery skills on a terrified little boy, unaliving him in the process. Fate takes the girl back to town and feeds her some barbecue. She begins to cry as soon as she starts eating, missing her home, which is an orphanage. He later takes her there, and both the nun and the girl thank him, moving him to tears as this is the first time someone has ever thanked his worthless ass for anything. Continuing the role of her wannabe Superman, he tells the girl to never let herself get caught up in hard times and smile through the pain. He borrowed that from his late father, who left to fight monsters when Fate was 5, and never came back. Which still hurts, but he's happy he could help the orphan girl as he bids her farewell. On his way back, Greed tells him he acquired a good sword fighting skill from that thug, and spills he would have died had he not landed his final strike exactly when he did. With such a strong skill in his arsenal, Fate looks forward to joining Roxy's household tomorrow, only to realize he forgot to go shop for some new clothes. Meanwhile, some jobless old man tells the local bartender how Sir Mason, Roxy's father, died in Galia, a demon-infested city, and worries that Roxy's people-pleasing ass won't be able to keep everyone in check like her old man used to. The next morning, Fate heads to Roxy's mansion dressed as her future husband and gets completely blinded by her lethal face card. He tells her she looks pretty, which rizzes her up, and she replies that he looks good too.
Yeah, boy.
After they'd blushed for a few minutes, she welcomes him inside and heads to her father's grave. As she tells him how Fate will be joining their household, he wonders if he's already been promoted to son-in-law status. He shrugs off his delusions as Roxy tells him how her father was slain by a monster in Galia, which is suspicious because none of the monsters there are supposed to be that strong. Fate takes this as his cue to overshare and tells her his father is dead too, hoping to bond over shared trauma. However, right before he can finally land his shot with her, the mansion's head maid, Haru, who looks like she bullies people for a living, shows up and starts bossing him around, telling him to behave while he's here. However, he is already irritating her, as he gobbles up his meat like he's never tasted it before. Still, his hunger does not get satiated, and his stomach starts growling soon enough. Before he can find a way to shut it up, Haru shows up and tells him Roxy wants to see him. He arrives at their very first date looking quite distracted, and being the disappointment that he is, doesn't even pay attention to what she's saying until she calls him Faye, the same nickname his father gave him. He asks why she's calling him that, and she answers it's because they are almost family now. Her effortless riz makes him blush, and he realizes she might be the dom in this relationship. This makes his blood pressure drop, and he faints, only to wake up later, feeling like a total wuss, which to be fair is not that different from how he usually feels. He doesn't get what's happening to him, so he asks his 17th century encyclopedia, Greed, about it. Greed tells him it's because he hasn't consumed any souls lately that his gluttony skill is starving, and that he'll have to consume souls until the day he dies. Otherwise, he'll go into overdrive and unalive whoever crosses paths with him.
Oh my god.
When that happens, Greed says he'll acquire some third-rate version of the Sharingan and finally feel like a cool MC. Surprisingly, when he looks into the mirror, Fate finds he's already unlocked it, and Greed warns him he has only some time left before he loses control of himself. He quickly gets dripped in his vigilante cloak and heads to a goblin-infested area nearby. However, even after slaying hundreds of them, his hunger doesn't wane. Greed takes him to a forest close by, with even stronger monster goblins, and Fate begins to slay them one by one. Eventually, his hunger calms down, and he feels like shit for unaliving so many beings, even if they were just useless side characters. He decides to head back, but a giant goblin king stomps into view. He scans the big guy's stats and finds that he has regeneration, which is something Fate now wants. He strikes from behind while he's eating, lopping off an arm, but dude is not down yet. Amazed by the arm that is as big as him, he barely dodges the Goblin King's next attack and starts hopping around like the weak chicken that he is. Greed tells him to man up and use his greatest weapon, plot armor. Fate complies and charges at the 10-foot-something demon with nothing but his sword, bringing him down at once. While he rejoices in his victory and finally attains the regeneration skill, Greed tells him to hand over all his stats to him and unlock his second form, which is even stronger than his current one. Fate initially hesitates because his own greed doesn't feel like giving up all those hard-earned stats on a piece of junk, but he eventually agrees. As soon as he does so, Greed undergoes his Winx Club transformation and turns into a bow. He tells Fate to test his new power on a peeping goblin, and Fate uses a magic arrow to slay him with one shot. Before heading back home, he donates the ears of the Goblin King to the church, hoping for forgiveness for his goblin slaughtering spree. A few days later, he catches Roxy trying to leave the mansion in commoner clothing and wonders if she's going to some costume party. She claims it's her disguise for the town inspection she's heading out on and tells him to come along with her. Their date, or whatever Greed keeps calling it, begins as she dances around like she's maybe on the spectrum and Fate tells her to walk carefully. She tells him not to call her by her name and instead call her Lexi to not blow her cover. At the same time, Greed begins yapping about how they both have nicknames for each other now, earning a well-deserved shut up from Fate. Roxy thinks he said that to her and begins blushing, making Fate wonder if she has a submissive side. He apologizes to her and blushes back when she says hanging out with him is exciting her. Greed butts in and tells Fate he finally has a shot at losing his V-card, forcing him to yell at him and almost teach him a lesson. However, Roxy stops Fate and takes the sword from him, inspecting it and offering to get it polished since it looks worn out. When she returns it, Greed curses Fate for ruining the scent of Roxy's perfume on him with his sweaty hands, making him wonder how he even got this man of culture for a sword. Later, as they arrive at the local market, Roxy starts by checking out some fruits. However, the excursion is short-lived as a royal knight soon shows up and forces all the commoners to line up to suck up to him. Just as this Power Ranger from Temu walks through the crowd, Fate's stomach begins growling, drawing his attention. He has no trouble kneeling before him, being an ex-punching bag, and he apologizes. The knight still almost kicks him down, only for Roxy to intervene and say he shouldn't hit him now that he's apologized. The knight asks if she's looking for a beating too, only to suspect he's seen her before. Fearing that her identity might get revealed, she instantly pulls Fate towards herself, pretending to be his lover and wondering why he didn't eat breakfast after she made it for him with so much love. Feeling her melons pressed against his arm makes Fate blush, and he shyly apologizes to her, promising to eat it later. Seeing the two lovebirds flirting right before his virgin, single ass burns the knight hard, and he lets them go. Roxy quickly drags Fate into a shady alley, making him wonder if this would be an appropriate place for their first workout session. Just then, he telepathically hears her thinking how much her heart is beating, as this is the first time she has held hands with a man, and he instantly chickens out. She notices he's embarrassed and lies that she's used to being around men and walks away, while Fate stays back, wondering if a stall has a handbook on how to lose your V-card in 5 minutes. Later, he finds her at a display, looking at gemstones, and notices she likes the one that matches her eyes. The merchant instantly guesses Fate can't afford it and introduces him to mineral ores instead, stating how they might or might not contain the gemstone they are looking for. Fate uses Identify skill to cheat, but before he can find something worthwhile, Roxy says she has no use for jewels and leaves. Fate follows after, like her dog, bummed he couldn't riz her up right there. She asks Fate if he has any warrior friends, but as always, he disappoints. The man couldn't network his way out of a kindergarten class. Just then, she overhears two commoners talking about the recent attack on the forest goblins and follows after to ask what they know. But they tell her to ask some warriors instead. Fate stays back, worried he might get identified as the culprit. They later stop at the tavern to gather more intel. The barkeep welcomes Fate and thinks Roxy might be his new girlfriend, making Fate worry that she might blow it all up, only to find her blushing and getting hot and bothered. Later, the barkeep starts dishing about a mountain of dead goblins that was found in the plains. People started suspecting it was a wandering monster that took them out, because no warrior would leave that big of a reward behind. He states how bad it'll be for business because no one would dare cross those plains now as long as this dangerous monster is out on the run. Fate blames himself for it all. Right then, the anime version of Humpty Dumpty walks in and reveals he overheard his warrior friends speculating it must be a lick who unalived all those goblins, and that the Holy Knights are already on a mission to capture it. Greed tells Fate he's burnt toast if he's caught by them with his stats all drained. But his bigger fear is Roxy finding out his hidden nature and bloodlust. Just then, a boy band supermodel walks in and decides Roxy should be his evening entertainment. This pisses off Fate, but before he can play the alpha, Roxy flicks the loser and sends him flying. Following this, he and his underlings kneel before her and apologize while Roxy undoes her hair and reveals her true identity. Instead of berating them for trying to treat her as their plaything, she says she regrets that holy knights are seen as something to be feared instead of something to depend on. And as feminism goes down the drain, the losers wonder at how dumb she is for a celebrity knight. Later, as they are returning home, Roxy reveals that Raphael, who is head of the Holy Knights for now, kept her in the dark about both the lick hunt and the goblin slaying. Just then, they overhear Hado and find him torturing yet another kid. Fate releases him from his grasp, and Roxy lectures them on human rights, questions Memel why she's a part of it too despite being a woman. She says it's because she's a certified bitch and Raphael gets pissed at Fate for acting all high and mighty. Roxy then asks why she wasn't informed about the lick hunt and Raphael lies that it's because he didn't want to interrupt her father's mourning. With this, the clown posse leaves and Fate and Roxy are left to take care of the kid. It turns out he's lost his mother, so as they try to find her, Fate can't help but imagine him and Roxy like a married couple. His Delulu ass returns to Earth once the boy's mother turns up, and Fate realizes he might be falling for Roxy. That night, Fate decides he'd still monster hunt to stay sane, but he'll do it behind some cool vigilante mask for a new alter ego.
I'm Batman.
To quell his guilt, he buys her the rock ore from the other day, and she's delighted to find it has the same blue gemstone she was looking for. In reality, Fate used Identify to cheat, but no one needs to know. Meanwhile, Raphael and the rest of the evil Holy Knights plan the next Galia mission and plot against Roxy. With his new mask, Fate turns into a Batman knockoff and earns the nickname Corpse. The next morning, while he's still tired from last night's expedition, Roxy takes him on a trip to her family's vineyard to show off how wealthy she is. There, he meets her mother, Aisha, a total MILF, and wonders if he's after the wrong woman in the family. Aisha greets him kindly and asks what he thinks about her daughter. Roxy mistook the reference, thinking she means what she's like in bed, and gets all flustered. Fate then blushes too. However, Aisha explains she means how she's doing as the new family head, and Fate takes this opportunity to turn on his inner Romeo. In full Giga Chad energy, he kneels and states he wouldn't want anything more than to die by her side and support her until his final breath, finally rizzing her up. However, the Riz boils over and Roxy leaves the scene, leaving her mother behind to fangirl alone. Roxy enters her room and reminisces about her daddy, recalling how she swore to him she'd become a knight as kind and powerful as him, and apologizes to him for turning out to be an utter disappointment. At the same time, Fate enjoys some grape juice with one of the workers who tells him Roxy visits the vineyard every year to fight the monsters that attack it at the time of harvesting. Fate's stomach growls at the mention of rare monsters, obviously because regular beef is overrated. That evening, as he returns to Roxy's mansion, he comes across somebody he's never seen before and finds her sus, but not because of her skin color. It's mostly because of her humongous axe and her Sharingan-esque eyes, which look exactly like his when he goes into starvation. Weirdly enough, she tells Fate she'll let him have the riverside monsters and walks off, leaving him confused and pestering Greed for answers. That smug narcissist refuses to give him any info, but his knight in shining armor Roxy arrives and tells him the stranger is a Galian, a pure-blooded one at that. She recounts how the kingdom of Galia was destroyed by a swarm of monsters years ago and their whole population was almost wiped out. However, since Fate isn't interested in some flat lowly, he asks Roxy about her plan to fight the Riverside monsters all by herself. She says she won't be alone and that it's her duty, so she can't run away from it, while her stupid single-celled brain drops all the grapes she was holding, leaving Fate to clean up her mess. The next day, after some Riverside monsters destroy a large field, Fate accompanies Roxy to spy on them, only to discover these supposed god-level threats are just some fancy Pokémons with fangs. Almost disappointed, Fate is ready to head back when the king of these beasts, a fancier Super Pokémon, shows up, and Fate's mouth starts to water. Greed explains it's a level 50 crown beast, which is something that's out of Roxy's league. Later, as she gaslights all the villagers about how she'll unalive the crown beast and save their lives and the crops, Fate realizes he must take matters into his own hands. That night, he sets out to satiate his hunger for this new kind of meat and uses Greed's new form to outright impale a bunch of them like they are nothing. When he takes his aim at the crown beast, he uses one of his underlings as a shield, making Fate question whether the beast is as strong as they say, after all. However, when he shoots at him, the steroid junkie grabs the arrows with his bare hands without being electrocuted.
What?
And Fate decides he needs to use some plain old fists since even physics doesn't work on this abomination. As he charges at him, Fate realizes the beast has the same plan, only that, according to Greed, his punch will clean Fate's clock if he gets hit. He quickly evades, only to be struck by the last standing underling. The big boss uses this chance to land his power punch, and although Fate mostly dodges it, its shockwaves send the boy flying into the river. He plays dead for a bit and, using his only brain cell, slays the final underling. Realizing he can't fight the crowned beast with his strength alone, Fate summons the power of plot armor and turns Greed into a brand new weapon out of thin air. This weapon is basically a mini nuke, and as Bro feels like this world's very own Oppenheimer, he unleashes it at the poor beast who tries to defend himself with a ball of air. Expectedly, he turns into mincemeat soon enough, and Fate wins. Just as he does so, his body starts burning, and he falls to his knees. Greed explains it's because he just consumed a crowned beast and his pea-sized power bank can't absorb it, so he'll have to endure it until he can cope. The next day, Roxy discovers all the beasts slain by the riverside and finds it suspicious. She yaps about this at lunch with her mother and Fate, all while Aisha watches how her daughter feels happier around Fate. Later, she decides to play matchmaker, calling Fate to her room while he practices rejecting her and explaining he isn't into older women. Luckily for him, she outright tells him to look after her daughter and be by her side always. Fate says he isn't suitable for that, but she tells him he doesn't need superpowers to be there for her. She compares it to how she, despite being basic, supported her husband too, and expects him to do the same. After cursing her mentally for calling him useless, he agrees. That night, even after slaying more than 100 goblins, Fate's hunger doesn't subside. Greed explains it's because he's tasted a crowned beast. These regular turkeys won't cut it anymore. He returns to the local bar sporting an eye patch like some discount Kanky, and overhears the barkeep talking to Humpty Dumpty about how the evil trio, led by Raphael's bowl cut, has schemed to send Roxy to Galia to die. He returns to the mansion hoping to convince Roxy not to go, but she tells him she's already decided and ignores him. Meanwhile, Raphael and company celebrate this W, and he asks Chin for Brain, Hado, to wipe out Corpse at all costs, tonight. The big night comes quickly, and Hado's ugly ass shows up to put on a circus for Fate at a Goblin Valley. His underlings overestimate their limited side character roles and claim they could take care of this corpse guy themselves, but even before they strike, Fate wipes the earth clean of them. As the rest of his pawns flee, Hado stands still with a constipated expression, and almost pees his nightly pants when Fate finally takes off his mask. Initially, his god complex comes in, and he tells Fate an ugly loser like him could never be the menace everyone is talking about, before yapping about his Nepo roots and his holy sword skill, which made him a holy knight in the first place. Fate listens to him with zero interest and instead asks Greed if he can take down a holy sword. Greed says he can, as long as they have plot armor, while Hado gets ready to strike. Fate dodges and teleports behind Hado, striking through his armor and cutting his sword in half. While the brainless loser stares into space and tries to run away, Fate aura farms hard and tells him to act like the cool Power Ranger he thinks he is. The talk no jutsu doesn't work, and Hado falls, reminding Fate of his pathetic past and how much Hado hurt him. He picks the turd up and cleans the bark off of several trees with his ugly face, all while Hado begs for mercy. It only infuriates Fate further, and he reminds him how he would never stop his bullying when he used to beg. Fueled with rage, he throws the useless piece of junk in the air and summons his portable nuclear reactor, blasting his ass to shreds. The stubborn trash still doesn't die and lies limbless on the ground when Fate approaches him and questions why Roxy is being sent to Galia. The loser says she volunteered herself and begs him to spare his life and he'll get her expedition cancelled. Fate tells him he's got it wrong because he isn't doing this for some cliché like love. This is for him, for revenge. With this, he skewers him and ends up with the Holy Sword skill. Greed takes this chance to act like his name and tells Fate he can level him up again by giving up on all his stats, and Greed turns into a scythe. According to Greed, Fate can now cut through literally anything. The next day, Roxy bids farewell to Fate as she heads out on her 3-year-long expedition and promises to meet again. Fate tries to talk her out of it one last time, but knows it's for nothing. As soon as she leaves, he decides there's no reason for him to be there. Their clapping session has been put off again, for 3 years this time, so he hands in his resignation and switches careers to become a warrior. A few days later, Roxy arrives at her first stop and delivers some emo speech about wanting to make the world a better place, hoping to get some recruits for this doomed mission. There, some flat baddie called Miria, who is all down bad for Roxy, along with Mugen, a ripped macho man, join the team. These two share a single brain cell and start annoying Roxy immediately. However, she holds it in, being the doormat that she is, and smiles, lying that she's happy about their company. At the same time, some lab nerd examining goblin parts from some of those Fate slayed discovers something fishy about the weapon used and finally concludes the wielder is using Greed, a weapon of mortal sin. Meanwhile, Fate arrives at Tetra, the city he used to live in with his father 5 years ago, until he was chased out for being poor and worthless. It brings back bitter memories, so he makes his first stop at a local bar, only to find some good-for-nothing losers bullying a man who was just asking for their help in warding off a monster attack. Fate aura farms and reminds them he's the MC, before turning to the man, who turns out to be Set, the same kid who chased him out of his village 5 years ago. Set kneels before Fate and begs him to help them against the monster attacks on his village, all while Fate recalls his days with his father, leading up to his death, and how he was stoned at his funeral because the village elders didn't want to feed a 10-year-old. He initially rejects Set, but Greed eventually convinces him to do it because gluttony is starving, and he'd have to unalive something anyway. Hoping to at least save his father's memories, he arrives there with Set, only to be met by the same hatred and prejudice. Set's father, the same village elder who kicked out little Fate, calls him garbage and his son an even bigger pile of trash for bringing in such a big loser to defend their village.
You are an old man and a fool!
This senile idiot announces he'll use Fate as a human sacrifice to ward off the monsters tonight and find some real warriors the day after. Fate resists crushing his skull and heads to Set's house, where he treats him to some food. There, Set tells him that his wife was unalived during one of the monster attacks and admits he used to be a big bastard, explaining how everything changed after he had his own daughter, and he realized how wrong he was. He also explains that the monsters attacking them are huge and can fly, and Greed deduces these are a dangerous kind that are smarter than most humans. As Set leaves for a bit, his daughter offers Fate a candy, which after eating, he collapses. Set is initially confused and begins to panic, only to later realize his own father, the village chief, roofied Fate so he can be used as bait. Just then, a fireball hits the village, and monsters start attacking it from all sides. While everyone outside gets barbecued, Set prepares an antidote for the sedative, and Fate finally comes back to his senses. The first thing he notices is the hell raging right outside and immediately rushes out, telling Set to stay inside at all costs. He notices the fancy cockroaches flying around and almost gets barbecued himself. On Greed's advice, he climbs a rooftop and uses his brand new scythe to fight these fancy roaches, which easily cuts through their next fireball. Following this, the roaches gather their fireballs in one place to beat him using the power of friendship, since that's the one thing he's lacking. But Fate just swings the scythe in their direction, wiping out the fireball and then their ugly asses one by one like bowling pins. With them gone, he acquires the fireball skill and focuses his attention on the big boss, a steroid-amped cockroach king. This guy immediately pulls a radioactive ball from his mouth and tries to attack Fate, but using his protagonist privilege, he easily slices through the gym cockroach, too. Once the fight is over, Set informs Fate that 90% of the village's population, including his father, has died, and he plans on moving to the city to look after his daughter. He also asks Fate to punch him in the face so he can stop feeling guilty about bullying in the past, and Fate immediately complies,
Damn!
giving him a broken tooth in the process. After they bid farewell, Fate visits his father's grave and tells him not to worry anymore because he's a badass vigilante now. Later, he gets on a coach to the next town and, in exchange for the ride, offers to protect the coachman through the bandit-infested trail. His time to shine soon arrives when a bunch of losers stop them and tell the coachman to hand them all his money. Fate steps in, hoping to act cool without his mask on for once, but the coachman gets in the way as he anxiously hugs him, turning his big moment into a BL side story. The villain takes this chance to rob them, but an attack from the sky pulverizes him. The coachman wonders if it was divine punishment, but as soon as Fate sees the weapon of destruction, he recognizes the wielder. She tells him he still owes her for the riverside monsters and asks for a ride. The coachman tells her to hop on, and she finally introduces herself to Fate as Mine of Wrath. He wonders if this baddie is just being fancy, but she reveals she knows he has the sin of gluttony, and that his sword is the sin of greed. Suddenly interested, Fate's cultured eyes take in the barren plain of her chest, only for her stomach to growl and throw him off. He offers her some beef jerky, and she finishes all of it, reducing her hotness score in his mind to 0. They arrive at their destination, and they are welcomed with a clown show in which the crackhead Holy Knight puts on a spectacle about his bravery, while all the town girls squeal about how much they want a slice of his pie. The coachman pays Fate, but Mine takes the money, claiming she's the one who dealt with the bandits. Seconds after that, she just falls asleep and Fate has to carry her to find a hotel. On his way there, he notices the townspeople have weird triangle, square, and circle-shaped tattoos on them, and wonders if he has gotten himself into a Squid Game spin-off. Ignoring that, he takes Mine to the hotel and fights back his cultured thoughts as he puts her to bed. Reminding himself he belongs to Roxy, he asks Greed about the 7 deadly sins for distraction. Greed explains that since these 7 abilities defy the laws of heaven, they are called sins, and Mine's axe, which is the mortal sin of sloth, is among them too. He warns Fate that he needs to learn to control his hunger, otherwise the price to pay for his sin, that is, unaliving living beings, will become too much to bear. To test it out, he heads to the nearby sand dunes and unalives a bunch of sandworms using Greed's bow form, combined with the fireball skill he stole from the fancy flying cockroaches. Just as he's starting to get a grip on his hunger, he smells a crowned beast nearby and follows it to find some third-rate warriors struggling to take it down. Fate steals the beast's attention with a fire-covered arrow, which the beast answers with its built-in rifle. When this doesn't work, the beast uses its special skill, Sandstorm, to cook Fate, but being the king of plot armor, Fate uses Greed's scythe form to cut through it. The sand loser realizes he can't win, so he detaches from his core and runs underground for cover. However, Fate summons his handy-dandy nuclear reactor and attacks it through the sand, finally unaliving it. He heads back to find yet another reward waiting for him as Mine stands before him without any clothes on, serving some lowly fanservice. She tells him she'll let him clap if he's having dirty thoughts already.
Giggity giggity.
But he shrugs her off, asking if she's going somewhere. She says she's heading out to unalive the sand monster that has a bounty on it, but he says he's already done it. Furious, she demands that they split the reward. Later, when they go to collect it, Mine makes fun of Fate's funky Batman mask. But before he can react, the clown of the town shows up and tells Fate he'll be working under him now. It pisses off Mine, who says she's the one who owns him, but the dimwit clown uses the forbidden "Are you lost baby girl" line on her, only to be sent flying into oblivion. Following this, Mine and Fate make a run for it and escape town. Continuing their adventures, Fate watches in horror as Mine devours their week's worth of food supplies, and he wonders why she hasn't become a fat pig by now. With all the McNuggets flowing through her veins, Mine continues without a care until her hormones make her act up, and she destroys the carriage they are traveling in. Mine's annoying tantrums force them to spend an extra night at a nearby stop called Hassan Village, which has a Hogwarts rip-off castle looming in the distance. While looking around, Fate stumbles upon some old geezer sitting depressed on a rock. This loser, who is named Aaron, happens to be a holy knight responsible for protecting this village, something that Fate finds difficult to believe. Surprisingly, he allows them to stay the night, but only if Fate takes him on in a duel. Fate takes on the challenge, thinking a wiry old man couldn't do much, only to be left baffled when Eren one-shots him with a single strike of his sword. Eren, on the other hand, cannot believe a measly level 1 such as Fate could have such OP stats, which makes him suspicious. Feeling like a worthless NPC, Fate prepares to pack his bags to leave the village. But the old man tells him that he will let Fate stay if he subscribes to his scan training session, and Fate agrees instantly, being the spineless freeloader that he is. The next morning, Fate's ass whooping begins, and after a few good punches rattle his empty head, he begins to improve, though he's still no match for Mr. Dumbledore. However, just as the training arc is about to be over, Fate remembers that he is the main character and turns on his gluttony, transforming into Temu Uchiha and impressing the old geezer. After losing his few remaining brain cells at the end of the training, Fate enters the dining hall to find Mine crashed out like Snorlax, surrounded by scraps of food. He channels his inner Bob Ross to scribble on Mine's face, just to get a hit of serotonin before the inevitable hell he knows she'll unleash. That night, Fate discovers a portrait of Eren with his wife and son, and he suspects that Eren is hiding a big secret about the castle as well as his family. Soon after, Mine wakes up screaming as if she has seen Donald Trump up close, when she had just caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, her blood boiling with rage. The next morning, Eren fights Fate using his great sword, giving him just a wooden stick to defend himself. Fate finally claps him back using the same flimsy stick, humiliating Eren's insecure ass. Mine arrives at the scene to get her revenge, as she quickly scribbles some facial hair on Fate's face, making him blush with embarrassment about his delayed puberty. That night at dinner, Mine tries to gather everyone's sympathy by announcing that her powers make her unable to taste any of the food she eats. The rest of the crew completely ignores her attention-seeking behavior as Fate catches Eren staring longingly at the castle. Eren finally spills the tea, saying that he used to own that castle until a great demon Licklord had attacked and kicked him out as if his rent was past due. His idiot son Luke had tried to stand his ground, but he had been nuked by the demon lord himself. Fate's gluttony is triggered at the mention of delicious demons, and his greedy stomach begins growling at the thought of having a demon-flavored Happy Meal. He and Eren decide to team up like some star-crossed lovers and end the Licklord's reign, whereas Mine ditches them to continue filling her black hole of a belly with more food. When the duo finally arrives at the castle, Fate almost soils his pants when he sees the horde of skeletons waiting to clap them. But with the help of greed and his homing arrows, he feels like an OP hero who just has to stand still and let his magic do all the work. After having a taste of the appetizer, Fate is more than ready to munch on the Licklord's soul. When the duo enters the castle, they expect it to look like Shrek's swamp, but instead they are greeted by a clean and homey ambience. Eren's son and wife welcome them warmly, as if nothing was wrong in the world and a demon lord was not on a rampage. Eren looks like he has seen a ghost, because he had spent all these years believing his family was dead. But here they stand, smiling like idiots. Fate tries his best to put his 2 brain cells to use, as he firmly believes that this is all an illusion spell at work. Luke proves his suspicions right when he suddenly swings his sword at his own father, his ghost being just as big of a wimpy loser as he was in life. Fate cannot kill these ghouls using greed, because that would subject them to an eternity of being roasted like a Thanksgiving turkey in the pits of hell. Eren refuses to let his family get clapped like that, so he asks Fate to deal with the Licklord and let him take care of his dysfunctional family. Fate finally faces the Licklord and is astonished to learn about his OP final boss level stats. With shaky legs, he manages to strike the demon, but then it starts spinning like a ballerina on crack, filling up the room with the lost souls of the people he has possessed. Fate is in a dilemma because he can't hurt these innocents with his sword, but then Eren comes to the rescue, immobilizing the horde. His ghost wife comes to the demon lord's rescue, begging Eren to not hurt her senpai. However, Eren is jealous of his wife simping for other men, and he brings out his holy sword and casts a spell, flash-banging everyone with a blinding, divine light. Eren's boomer age starts to show when he is not able to handle the Licklord's insane aura, and Fate has to step in, as he picks up Luke's holy sword and joins Eren. Together, they unite their powers to end the Licklord with a lame light show. After the battle is over, Eren bids farewell to his dead son and wife, whose clingy souls keep yapping and just won't move on to the afterlife. Eren's heart is heavy with guilt for abandoning his family. but they reassure him that they had a blast partying in the abandoned castle with the Lick Lord and his army of the dead. The next morning, when the duo returns to the village, they find an impatient Mine awaiting them. Before she can get a chance to throw another temper tantrum, Aaron quickly bribes her with a huge bag full of coins to shut up her gold digger ass. He suddenly recalls that 50 years ago, a warrior had saved this village from a horde of monsters, and he now realizes that it had been Mine all along. Mine uses this opportunity to deliver an emo punchline as she says that she is a phantom who just cannot die. Back home, Memel and Raphael rejoice at the sight of the Philosopher's Stone, dreaming about the endless degeneracy they'll get up to once they become immortal. Their celebration is cut short when the butler enters and reveals that Hato has been slain by a mysterious warrior named Corpse. Little do they know that behind this GigaChad name is our puny little MC, Fate himself. The next morning, the squad resumes their journey, as Mine continues inhaling food at lightning speed, saying that she needs a lot of calories to throw her baby tantrums. She kneels in front of him and stuffs a chocolate bar in Fate's mouth, her little waifu assets on full display. Mine continues to riz up Fate, falling asleep in his lap, making his mouth water for reasons other than the chocolate. Fate wonders about Mine's motives, as he is certain that she is on some top-secret mission. Meanwhile, Roxy and her army are slowly making their way to the kingdom of Galia, as they arrive at Hassan village soon after Fate has left. Roxy arrives at the abandoned castle accompanied by the Mugen and the dim-wit NPC Miria. However, after getting a closer look, Roxy realizes that the Lick Lord's villain arc is over and wonders about the GigaChad who has defeated him. Right then, Aaron enters the scene to get all the credit, but is immediately humbled by Miria, who asks why this old geezer has not retired yet. Aaron reveals that he was a great friend of Roxy's parents, and was the one who had named her. He recalls his great battle with the Lick Lord, and reluctantly admits that someone else had helped him end his tyranny. The girls immediately begin thirsting for this mysterious hero, begging Aaron to spill more details. He feels his chances of rizzing up the cute chicks fizzle away, so he refuses to reveal Fate's name, since Fate had asked him to keep his visit a secret anyway. Aaron confronts Roxy about her risky mission to Galia, and she proudly announces that she has the balls to handle anything this mission has in store for her. She reveals the news of her father's death, which comes as a great shock to Aaron, but his perverted brain quickly recovers as he offers Roxy a private one-on-one training session. Roxy makes her crew slave away like unpaid NPCs, while she has a mighty good time training with Aaron. Meanwhile, Fate and Mine seem to have stumbled upon the 9th circle of hell, where everything is in ruins. Mine reveals that this is where she was born, and Fate has no trouble believing this since someone as demonic as Mine could have only been born in a dump like this. As they progress onward, they stumble upon a gigantic cocoon straight out of some alien movie, and it is revealed that the cocoon is in fact a biological weapon called a chimera created by Galia. Greed explains that the chimera contains hundreds of monsters sewn together into one, and Fate's belly begins growling at the thought of having demon soup for dinner. Mine swings her axe, creating a gaping hole in the chimera cocoon, revealing a white-haired baddie with her assets conveniently covered by some loose strands of hair. She emerges from the cocoon, riding a knockoff Evangelion robot, and Mine tells Fate that he has to kill her using his sword and consume her soul. Fate, however, is down bad for the chick, and doesn't want to sentence her to eternal misery. Mine tells him to grow some balls, but the baddie is already going psycho mode, sending a pulse of energy which melts the ground beneath them. Mine and Fate run for their lives, a tsunami of lava roasting their behinds, when Mine channels her inner Moses and splits the lava sea into two. The duo teams up and strikes the chimera with all their power, but the mecha simply regenerates its lost limbs. In fact, it even grows a pair of enormous wings just to mock them. Mine stands tall and proud, for a midget, ready to strike back, while Fate is in a corner, pissing his pants. He realizes he is giving off major beta energy, so he snaps out of it, getting fully steroid amped with his eye glowing red. Fate leaps up high and shoots the chimera with a magical arrow that turns it to stone. Without wasting a second, Mine swings at it with her axe, crumbling it to pieces. However, before Fate can deliver the final blow, the chimera hides away inside a protective shell. Fate turns on his baddie sensor, pinpointing her exact location and swinging his scythe, piercing right through the barrier and into the girl's chest. Out of desperation, she leaps up and flies away, but Mine makes Fate sit on her axe like a kid at a Disneyland ride, flinging him towards the chimera. However, as soon as Fate catches up with her, The chimera locks him inside a barrier, turning on the oven and preparing to cook him alive like a well-done steak. Before the heat gets to him, Fate quickly stabs the white-haired girl right in the heart, sad to see another baddie gone before she could have been rizzed up. Right before she passes away, Fate's telepathy allows him to catch a glimpse of her past life. He sees a scientist surrounded by little kids, running a daycare center that involves fun activities such as being victims of traumatizing experiments. He sees the white-haired girl hugging another little boy, when suddenly Fate snaps back to reality and drops to the ground like a zapped mosquito. Despite the delicious meal the baddie had been, Fate feels incredibly depressed after consuming her soul. Greed tells him that the girl had been similar to Fate in a lot of aspects, but his two brain cells are unable to comprehend this. Once the battle is over, Mind tells him that whoever has been transformed into a chimera needs to be eliminated immediately. Fate is scared that eating up baddies at this rate will make him go berserk one day, and he requests Mind to unalive him if that ever happens. Mind cannot think of a more enjoyable activity than sending Fate to the Shadow Realm, so she happily accepts the deal, sneaking in a quick hug to not offend him. Later that day, Fate's ability gets a glow-up, adding a shield to his arsenal of weapons, and Mind informs him that he will have to venture on towards Babylon all alone, since she has some urgent business to attend to. On his way to the great city of Babylon, Fate continues his yapping with Greed, looking like a complete lunatic to passers-by. Greed reveals that the weapons of mortal sins cannot be destroyed, which gives Fate hope for his future boss battles. Inside the walls of Babylon, as he is busy loitering around stuffing his belly, the city gets a surprise visit by Roxy, making Fate have a panic attack. He quickly puts on his mask and is too busy checking out his crush to notice that a woman is standing right behind him, plotting Roxy's final days. The town hall of Babylon looks like a scene from GTA Vice City, as it is swarming with crackhead mercenaries and trigger-happy psychos. Babylon has forgiven all of their past crimes, since they are desperate to recruit as much help as possible to defend against monsters, even if it means filling up the town with a horde of budget John Wicks. Lady Roxy meets up with the holy knight in charge of Babylon named Alistair, who is a blonde Riz Lord with a jawline polished by the gods. Roxy introduces herself and announces that she will be joining forces with Babylon to protect Galia from future attacks, and Alistair instantly accepts the deal, his mind busy imagining R18 scenarios of the two. The next morning, Fate is roaming in the market window shopping, his stomach growling with hunger and his pockets empty of gold. He had gotten used to living off of charity as well as Mind's hard work, but now he was practically a hobo begging for scraps. Greed spots a weapon shop and begs Fate to buy a proper sheath for him, since it felt dishonored being used by a washed loser like Fate and being out on display all the time. The shopkeeper spots them eyeing his collection, and he runs out to entertain them, only to be disappointed when he gets a full look at Fate's dumpster outfit. Once inside, he takes a closer look at Greed, showering it with praises, hoping that the glazing will convince Fate to spend some money. Greed's ego reaches the ninth sky, and it is severely disappointed when Fate sprints out of the shop after he learns that a custom sheath will cost him 500 gold coins. Outside the walls of Babylon, a group of mercenaries invite Fate to tag along with them to make some money by killing monsters. His ego is too inflated to join forces with a bunch of no-skill losers, so he refuses, only to realize later that if he wants to survive in this bounty city, he will have to work his ass off. On his way to Galia, Fate passes through a green wasteland that is low-key giving Shrek's swamp vibes, and he has to plug his nose to not lose his lunch. He has only covered a little distance when he encounters a horde of orcs, which are stampeding towards him at lightning speed. The other mercenaries get to work and try their best to dodge the NPC allegations, and Fate uses his OP shield to dodge the arrow attacks. He bulldozes through them, ramming his shield into the orcs and turning them into a monster pie. Once the bloodshed is over, Fate realizes that his gluttony skill didn't activate despite slaying so many monsters, and he wonders if it has anything to do with the white-haired baddie he had fought earlier. After ripping off the orc ears, Fate visits the guild to exchange them for gold coins. However, the other mercenaries gang up on him out of jealousy, as they believe that the newbie Fate is taking over their business, when in reality they all would have been turned into mashed potatoes had it not been for Fate's powers. Channeling his inner MC, Fate single-handedly defeats the noobs, one by one, as if he were the hero of some Thai fighting movie. As he is about to leave the shop after making big bucks, he is stopped by Roxy, who enters the shop to investigate the ruckus. Fate puts on a brave front when in reality he is sweating like it's a boss battle, since he wants to keep his identity hidden from Roxy. After explaining his side of the story, Roxy lets him go without any penalty. However, she does drag him for his crusty appearance, advising him to take a shower. Fate introduces himself as Corpse, red as a tomato out of sheer embarrassment, as he sprints out of the shop before someone else can comment on his homeless aesthetic. Out on the streets, Fate is once again approached by the shopkeeper named Jade, who seems very excited to run into him. Although Jade had practically kicked him out of his shop for being a broke nobody, he now wanted to partner up with Fate now that he had made a name for himself battling all those orcs. He offers to sell him a fully emo-coated armor set at a discounted price, and all Fate has to do in exchange is advertise his shop. Now suited up in MC core elegance,
Somebody stop me!
Fate visits a pub to feed his growling stomach. However, he is distracted by a crowd of men gathered around someone, whistling and going absolutely feral. On closer inspection, the object of everyone's interest turns out to be a blue-haired hottie and her melons, and Fate falls instantly in love, unable to keep his eyes off of her. The beauty approaches him and calls Fate out by his real name, snapping him out of his lustful daydreaming. Fate can feel her powerful aura and knows that she has a skill of deadly sin. She introduces herself as Eris, revealing that her skill is that of lust, which comes as no surprise to Fate, judging by the tent in his pants. She asks him to take off his mask, using her melons and their unrealistic jiggle physics to make Fate follow her commands. Fate asks her if she knows mine, and it's obvious from her shift in tone that the two don't exactly exchange Christmas cards. She lets Fate know that there's a bunch of other chimeras who could awaken at any moment, and Fate's first thought is to protect Roxy at all costs. Eris finally reveals her grand scheme, which blows Fate's mind. Apparently, she believes that Roxy needs to die a martyr in order for the kingdom of Galia to overcome these dark times. Since the entire nation simps for Roxy, her death will cause so much pain and turmoil that a brand new user of a deadly sin will be born from the chaos, who will lead Galia to greatness. Fate cannot bear thinking about Roxy's death, and he throws a temper tantrum and storms out of the bar, vowing to protect her even if it costs him his own life. The next morning, Roxy discovers that a group of noob good-for-nothing knights who had been sent on a mission to collect raw materials for Galia had gone missing. After blurting out curses that are too unholy to mention, she prepares to head to Galia herself on a rescue mission. Meanwhile, at the weapons shop, Fate is busy upgrading his gear, the serotonin rush of shopping finally getting to him too. Jade informs him that to build an ideal sheath for his sword, he will need to acquire a magic crystal, which can only be found at the ravine near Galia. Fate cannot believe that he has to risk his life to acquire materials for his weapons, and then pay a hefty price to buy them too, but his smooth brain accepts the scam deal. Soon after, Fate arrives at the ravine, only to find a horde of ugly monsters waiting for him. He brings out his shield and turns on his MC plot armor, ramming the shield into the orcs and defeating them with ease without getting even a scratch on himself. Surprisingly, Roxy and her squad are also making their way towards the ravine, but despite using their collective brain cells, they cannot figure out how to use the compass.
No, you're so dumb.
Their thick heads finally come up with a plan to follow the path that has the most number of monsters, praying to God that this stupid plan will get them to their destination. Once the sun has set, Fate decides to rest for a while, but he ends up having the trippiest fever dream of his life, as if he had taken a hit from the worst joint before passing out. In his dream, he encounters the same white-haired baddie from before, only now she has some proper clothes on with her melons well hidden. She starts yapping as if she is on some incel podcast, but Fate is unable to understand what she's saying. Suddenly, everything turns red and Fate begins drowning in a pool of blood, seeing the dead bodies of familiar faces scattered all around him. He jolts awake, realizing that some dangerous monsters are nearby based on the disgusting smell that is in the air. From the darkness, a group of musky salamanders emerges, charging towards Fate at full speed. He turns on his inbuilt night vision, trying to copy Ironman from Temu, and shoots his homing arrows at the creatures. Despite getting gravely injured, they do not seem to care and keep zooming like Sonic. Fate's ego turns to dust when he realizes that the monsters aren't after him at all, as they sprint right past him. The salamanders soon arrive at Roxy's campsite, with their 2 brain cells focused on hunting Roxy. Alistair's Riz-maxing turns out to be his only real skill, as he can do nothing to fight against the sudden attack. Miria channels her inner Mikasa and swings at the salamanders a couple of times, only to get absolutely obliterated by a single strike. Roxy comes to check up on Miria, leaving her back exposed, as the salamanders see the perfect opportunity to eat up delicious chick. However, before they can get their hands on Roxy, Fate pulls up like the final boss, fully decked out in his plot armor. With a few strikes from his sword, he easily crushes the monsters, hoping that this MC behavior will finally land him a clapping session with Roxy. In exchange for literally saving their lives, the squad helps Fate find the ravine, though he had hoped he would be offered gold and a couple of chicks at the very least. After saying their goodbyes, Roxy departs to continue her mission of rescuing her lost comrades. Fate begins his search for the magic crystal, and is surprised to enter a region full of lush greenery, with no hint of demon stench for miles. Even more unexpected, he finds Eris wandering through the forest, seemingly focused on some task. After giving himself some extra time to check her out to his heart's desire, Fate secretly follows her, his eyes set straight on her assets. However, he is distracted by the giant body of an inactive chimera buried in the side of a mountain. Fate is relieved when he realizes that the chimera doesn't have a core, because he is in no mood to fight another baddie today. He wonders if Eris is behind this chimera and all the other chaotic events today, when he hears a loud crash coming from the direction where Roxy was headed. To no one's surprise, Roxy finds herself surrounded by another horde of chimeras, and her squad is standing there like fools as always. Fate comes to their rescue yet again, only to find that Miria, Mugen and Alistair are already injured before the battle has even started. Joining forces with Roxy, he defeats the chimeras one by one, slashing their ankles to make them immobile, as Roxy strikes at their cores to unalive them for good. Their duo synergy makes them look like star-crossed lovers, at least from Fate's POV, which may or may not be heavily biased. The last chimera seems to have an actual will to live, as it leaps into the air out of desperation. When it lands on the ground, the earth shatters underneath his substantial weight, making Fate and Roxy fall into a dark abyss. Even during these dangerous times, Fate doesn't waste the opportunity to get touchy with his crush, as he takes her in his arms and promises her that he will land them safely. After nearly shattering their spines, Fate regains consciousness sometime later only to find Roxy lying in his lap, a bit too close to Frank and the beans.
Oh my God!
He realizes that he doesn't have his mask on, and frantically searches for it as Roxy slowly comes back to her senses. As they discuss their next move, Roxy reveals that the lost squad they had been searching for had been as useless as her current one, since they had found their dead remains. Roxy must have hit her head pretty hard, because she starts yapping about how much she misses Fate back home and wishes him the best of luck. The real Fate sitting right next to her can only nod along, his identity being extremely close to being exposed. Their honeymoon arc is cut short by Fate's gluttony being activated, and he knows that the annoying chimera is back at it again, being so close to clapping the girl of his dreams, only to be cockblocked by some brain-dead monster, fills him with immense rage, and he goes all out with his scythe, obliterating the chimera. Roxy is a bit scared seeing this side of Fate, but the Wattpad fangirl in her loves seeing her boy have a dark side. Once the battle is over, some random bits of rocks fall over to reveal a bunch of glowing crystals, the same ones that Fate had been hunting for. With their missions accomplished, Roxy returns to Babylon, and Fate continues his hunt for monsters, a darkness brewing inside him. Almost a month later, Fate and Roxy stand at the town center, facing off against each other in a duel. Their enemies to lovers arc seems to be fully in play, as Roxy is pissed off by how much trouble Fate has been causing in town lately. His defense is that other noobs keep picking fights with him for no reason, so he has to show them who the real MC of this show is. Roxy pleads with him to join the Holy Knights, which will prevent anyone from bothering him ever again. But Fate's ego is too big to join the team of his childhood bullies, so he refuses her offer. He keeps his sword sheathed, not wanting to go overboard and actually hurt his waifu, but Roxy has no such intentions, as she plans to go all out. Fate is taken aback by Roxy's intense aura, since each strike of hers carries immense weight. She sneaks in a swift attack, putting a crack in Fate's mask, which is when he finally realizes that Roxy isn't here to play games, she wants his blood. Fate decides to finally get serious, revealing that his sword sheath is, in fact, an attachment that gives it special powers. Roxy is confused seeing this, since only Holy Knights can practice this technique. Fate moves to attack, only for his ADHD to distract him by Roxy's butterfly necklace, the same one that he had gifted her. Roxy finally delivers the final blow and sends Fate's sword flying in the air, winning the duel. During their fight, Roxy had noticed that the way Fate fought was quite similar to how Eren had taught her, and she confronts him about it. However, Fate stays silent, only advising her to keep herself safe during these dangerous times. After the duel, Mugen approaches Fate with information about the chimeras, saying that the logo on their heads must mean they're being controlled by someone evil. He tells Fate that his daughter Rain is an expert when it comes to studying chimeras, and Fate requests him to involve his daughter in this case. Mugen believes that Fate is trying to hit on his daughter and runs him down for it, even though he had been the one to bring her up in the first place. Rain turns out to be a purple-haired girl with sunken eyes and no will to live. She has recently learned about Raphael's discovery of the Philosopher's Stone and how that stone is rumored to heal all wounds at the cost of taking over your mind and soul. Later that afternoon, Fate is lounging in his bed thinking of the chicks he has met before, when he recalls a conversation he had with Mine. She had told him about an ability called Domain of E, and had urged him to master it because only then would Fate be able to take on the divine dragon itself. Fate has no clue how he is supposed to practice anything right now, since he is stuck in this dingy town surrounded by criminals and Loki watching over the love of his life. His life crisis is interrupted by the loud blaring of a siren, which can only mean monster trouble. Soon enough, in the town hall, Roxy receives news that a massive group of monsters is currently stampeding towards Babylon. She immediately readies her troops, giving them the depressing speech that generals give before sending their soldiers to their inevitable demise. As the squad marches on to the battlefield, Fate quietly watches them, thinking about how to make the best entrance to get the most views. Suddenly, his gluttony activates and he looks around to find what had triggered it. But the barren landscape stretches out for miles with only Roxy's army in sight. However, Fate focuses his vision to realize that something huge is lurking underground, moving at lightning speed towards Roxy. He shoots his magic arrow at the mysterious creature, enhancing the range and penetration of the arrow to make it hit harder. A few seconds later, an ugly, slimy, slug-like monster appears from underground, bearing the same symbol on its dumb little head as the monsters who had been chasing Roxy. Fate leaps in the air to strike it with full force, but the slug lets out a nasty burp like someone's grandpa at dinner, making it rain acid all around Fate. His movements are compromised because he would instantly die if he came into contact with the pungent acid, so Fate shoots out a fire arrow instead, hoping to cook it alive. The monster seems to have more brain cells than Fate, as it swiftly dodges the attack, materializing behind him. The slug has no time to waste on Fate's dumb little tricks, so it goes back underground to hunt for Roxy, leaving behind small baby slugs to occupy Fate. After dealing with the minions, Fate runs after the mama slug, hoping to be there when it resurfaces. Once he feels it coming, he readies his powered-up arrow, juiced to the max, and shoots it instantly, landing it cleanly at its core. However, instead of vanishing, the slug keeps its form, still functioning despite having its core blown off. This is when Fate notices another man standing nearby, who seems to be a die-hard Fate fan, judging by his similar edgy outfit as well as his face mask, the only difference being his dirty blonde hair. The blondie is wielding a gun sword, with the mortal sin power of envy. Using its magical bullets, he splits the slimy slug's core into multiple pieces, giving it the power of infinite replication. The smaller slugs all attack Fate at once, swallowing him whole, and for a second, it appears that our puny little MC is done for good. However, he is survived by holding his breath, and he appears out of their acidic bellies completely unaffected like some local fancy hero. Fate's stats have been completely maxed out, but none of his attacks seem to land on the mysterious guy standing before him. After tolerating Fate for a while, the blondie pulls out his gun, shooting a barrage of bullets at him, as Fate hides behind his shield. The impact of the bullets still gets to him through his thick shield, and he hits the ground as a bloody mess. The blondie approaches Fate, pointing his gun at him, about to shoot the final bullet, while Fate is going through his main character internal monologue trying to hype himself up. After enough words of affirmation, Fate finally reaches the domain of E, surprising the blondie with his sudden display of GigaChad aura. With his new surge of power, his strikes land perfectly now, and he even manages to destroy his enemy's mask, revealing that the blonde brat behind it had been Alistair all along.
What?
He plays a flute, summoning the divine dragon onto the battlefield, which is headed straight for Roxy. Fate makes a run for it, trying to rescue his one-sided love interest, but Alistair continues being a nuisance, shooting at him and blocking Fate's way using a wall of slimy slugs. Meanwhile, Roxy's crew is busy getting absolutely destroyed by the orcs, and they practically give up when they see the divine dragon descending upon them. Roxy channels her inner baddie and faces off with a beast. But one powerful beam of energy from the chimera is enough to put her back in her place at the trash tier. Thankfully, she isn't burned to a crisp because of Fate, who makes his heroic entrance by guarding Roxy with his OP shield. Although his tactic works, the chimera's bad breath does rip away Fate's mask, exposing his real identity. Roxy confronts him, and Fate has no choice but to turn around and accept his new reality. Roxy is shocked to see Fate's ugly face staring back at her, since she has spent so long missing him and he had been by her side the entire time, rescuing her every damn day from some life-threatening incident. Fate protects her using his shield, absorbing the chimera's energy blast to his maximum capacity. But even his main character plot armor had its limits. With his newly upgraded abilities, he is even more OP than before, and he uses a new spell to bind the chimera in place, making it immobile. Alistair soon arrives at the scene to protect his puppy, and is heartbroken to find it injured and unable to move. This sight makes him lose his marbles, as he shoots like a wild animal at Fate. Fate has also grown quite weak after using the domain of E, so Alistair completely overpowers him, fighting like a true villain and crushing him in their duel. Alistair also realizes that Fate is sticking right next to the chimera, and he knows it is because Fate's trapping spell will only work if he stays near his target. He continues his villainous yapping, rage-baiting Fate into making a dumb move, as Alistair strikes at him and slices off his arm. However, Fate appears behind him in the biggest plot twist ever. He had used illusion magic to trick Alistair, sacrificing his own arm to be able to strike him right in the heart. Once Alistair has been unalived, Fate gets sucked into the Shadow Realm, where he meets the white-haired girl from before, who thanks him for putting her out of her misery. She warns Fate that he will enter his Joker arc of insanity if he slays the divine dragon, and the red-haired Greed even makes an appearance to warn Fate about the same thing. However, Fate is dead set on saving Roxy, even if that means losing his mind in the process. Out in the real world, Fate's trapping spell finally wears off, and the dragon unleashes its full potential. But without Alistair, it is just a dumb puppy with no master to control it, and Fate ends up beating it after a few one-handed strikes with his sword. Once Greed has consumed the dragon's soul, Fate feels himself going berserk, so he makes his biggest sacrifice yet, resetting his stats to go back to the newbest level, so that his berserk mode won't be a threat to anyone. At this moment, Mine arrives on the battlefield, swinging around her giant axe, here to fulfill her promise she had made a long time ago. Fate feels grateful to see her for once and asks her to end his suffering, as he didn't want Roxy to see him in such a miserable state. Mine is more than happy to follow his command, but her final swing is interrupted by Roxy herself, who wraps her arms around Fate, screaming at Mine to stop. All of Fate's plans to end his life go out of the window as soon as he feels her waifu arms around him, and his will to live returns instantly. Roxy convinces him to return with her to Babylon, and Fate accepts her offer, ditching Mine like a bridesmaid on the battlefield. Back at Babylon, Fate passes out for an entire week and wakes up to find Mine and Eris waiting for him in his room. On an ordinary day, waking up to find two baddies in his room would have been a dream come true for him. But there were more pressing concerns on Fate's mind, such as the lack of his left arm. Mine hands over Greed to him, who is thankful to return to Fate after spending many days being subjected to Mine's yapping. Fate learns that Alistair was under Envy's mind control all along, and slaying Roxy had also been Envy's idea. Mine made sure to throw Envy away as far as possible, so that he wouldn't get his grimy hands on another innocent soul in the future. Eris proposes to team up with Fate, now that her previous plans of unaliving Roxy had fallen apart. She promises to bring back Fate's arm and also tells him to leave Babylon before Roxy arrives, since Fate is still a huge danger to Roxy due to his berserker mode. Meanwhile, Roxy is on her way to surprise Fate, even buying blueberries to nurse him back to health. However, when she reaches his room, she finds it abandoned, with a goodbye letter from Fate explaining about his gluttony skill and the reason why he had to leave. Roxy thinks back to her childhood, when she had first encountered Fate one night, sitting all by himself like a loser being bullied at lunch. He had been jump-scared by her sudden questioning, getting PTSD from all the bullying, which had made Roxy ashamed of being a holy knight. However, once she had fed him a few sandwiches, he had showered her with praises, giving her back the confidence she needed. Meanwhile, the news of Fate's heroic adventures had reached Raphael and Memo, who finally knew that it was Fate who had unalived Hado. Raphael excuses himself to practice some magic, but instead spends the night laughing like an absolute maniac, thanking fate for unaliving Hado. Back on the outskirts of Babylon, Fate practices some healing magic, finally learning the difficult spell and restoring his arm back to normal. Mine and Eris leave him alone, as he continues on his regular adventures, slaying monsters to make some money and clapping some baddies on the side. Thanks for watching until the end, you absolute legend. To throw off fake fans, drop "What a flat lowly" in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on one of our other exciting videos on the screen. Stay awesome, stay AniGeek.